everybody. Welcome back to another podcast with Mia and Jan. We still haven't named it yet, so at this point, if you have any ideas, please leave a comment below. This is our second podcast episode, and we are going to be tackling the huge and heavy topic of mental illness, but specifically mental illness in marriage. This has been requested for a long time now, and I didn't want to do this video or podcast until I could do it with my husband, because I think that he has such a huge part in how we navigate my mental illness and even certain occasions in our 4-year marriage where he's dealt with depression and anxiety. So we want to dig into that today. But before we dive into that, I just want to set the stage that we will be doing one podcast episode per month that will be uploaded on my YouTube channel for free for everyone to listen to. But this podcast primarily is a Patreon member exclusive bonus. So for our Patreon members, we will have 2 episodes every month for you that will be exclusive to Patreon members. So if you want to be a Patreon member for just $5 a month and get 2 bonus episodes with me and Jan, head to patreon.com/Mia Hemstad. And for just $5 a month, you can help us support our podcast, support the work that we're doing, and get 2 bonus episodes a month. So that's 3 episodes total for Patreon members, and then 1 episode every month for everyone else. And I'm just reiterating that because if you did listen to the first podcast, I think I said 2 episodes on YouTube and 2 episodes on Patreon. And I realized I was being very unrealistic for a busy couple with 2 small kids and a full-time job. So we're resetting expectations there. And we really do appreciate the support for anyone who wants to be a Patreon member. And I also want to say that I have a merch store now. So if you want to check that out, I will leave a link in the description. But yeah, setting the stage though, it is not almost 10 o'clock at night on a Friday. It's been a long week and I'm wearing my favorite pair of sweatpants and my sweatshirt from Target. It was on clearance and it's like literally my favorite sweatshirt. And Jan is one of those people that actually doesn't like wearing sweatpants. He prefers to be in jeans all the time. And I think he's kind of psycho for it. So
I like wearing jeans.
If
right
anyone,
now I'm wearing shorts and t-shirt.
If anyone has a husband that literally doesn't like wearing sweatpants, like holler at me, because I am worried my husband is like really weird or like has a problem, because who doesn't like wearing sweatpants?
Problem.
I have a hole in the sweatpants I'm wearing.
Don't really own sweatpants. That's the
You
thing.
do. You gave away the sweatpants you had, and I'm like, what is wrong with you?
True.
And you're like, oh, I never wear them. I'm like, why don't you wear your sweatpants? Like on the weekend when he wakes up in the morning, he puts jeans on, guys. Like it doesn't make any sense. And the sweatpants I'm wearing right now, I got for free. Like I'm one of those people. I got for free. They have a hole in them. I still wear them out. He's like, yeah, there's a hole. I'm like, my underwear is dark. You can't really see that there's a hole. It's fine. And he thinks I'm crazy for that. Anyway, just let me know if any of you have a partner that doesn't like wearing sweatpants. Like, please tell me, because I'm seriously concerned. Anyway, that is just setting the tone, like where we're at right now. 2 tired parents, end of the week. But we wanted to come on here and talk about this issue because, again, hashtag quarantine life, hashtag COVID-19. Why am I talking in hashtags? Such a millennial. But basically, mental health is a topic. And today on my Instagram, I asked people how their mental health was doing. And most of the people who responded to the poll said that their mental health was pretty bad. And that made me so sad. And I know it's because we're all under a lot of stress right now. A lot of us have lost our jobs. A lot of us have had our hours cut. Some of us have a loved one who's either working on the front lines. I know Jan's dad, my father-in-law, he's working in the emergency room or the ICU in the Seattle hospital. And that's really stressful. And we're just, we're all affected by this pandemic. And it's really crazy to walk down the street and the person across from you who you don't even know their name, we're all affected by this same thing. And it's really crazy. It's really scary, but also very unifying at the same time. And one thing that I think is unifying all of us is the stress associated with it. And especially the stress in marriages, especially if you're stuck at home with your kids and your typical childcare options are no longer in existence because of what's happening. We really want to just tackle how to navigate mental illness in marriage, because it's something that we are extremely familiar with because of my situation. So a little bit of background, I've always had anxiety, and then depression kind of kicked in when I was, 2013, 2014. So Jan's kind of always dealt with it to varying degrees. That we've had such a journey with it, and I'm just gonna let you. I'm gonna let you start with like your perspective on like when did you start to realize like, oh, Mia struggles with anxiety or Mia struggles with depression.
Pretty early on. I mostly the anxiety end of it because that progressively got worse throughout college.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I don't know if I like realized that you had depression until after college and you started talking about more of the things that had affected you from like your childhood and that sort of stuff. And then that started to make more sense. And
Mm-hmm.
then, I mean, that really kind of hit home when I guess postpartum came around too,
Mm.
like, because then it got really bad.
And when you say really bad, what was that for you? Like, what happened that made you think, oh wow, that this is getting really bad? Like, how do
Um,
you define really bad?
I guess, I mean, more
And you can
like,
say whatever. Like,
I
I'm
know,
honest.
I guess more tearfulness and
Mm.
a lot more just like feeling hopeless.
Mm.
And you
Thanks.
were expressing that more
Yeah.
often and that sort of thing. So then it became very obvious at that point.
And were you labeling it in your head depression, or were you just like, wow, Mia's just really sad. This is strange.
No, I think I realized that. I mean, once you were pregnant or after you had Charlie, it was. I feel like it was very abundantly clear. A lot more so, and it happened right after you had
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Charlie,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's like, oh, this is obviously postpartum depression. Like, but it like amplified all of those aspects where you already had that kind of general depression.
Yeah. I don't remember you ever saying that you think I had postpartum depression.
I don't know. I may have said it. I don't honestly don't remember.
No, and I don't think I think you're saying that now because you know, looking back. But I think when we both were in it and we had just had our first child and our worlds were turned upside down and we didn't really have much family support at all, I think we were both struggling. You were really struggling with the sleep deprivation. Charlie was
Yeah.
not a good sleeper. He cried a lot. And I think you knew I was hurting, but I don't think you had like the bandwidth to go, hey, I think you have postpartum depression. Let's get it checked out. And a lot of people
Yeah.
they're able
And
to
I'm pretty sure
go
they
ahead.
diagnosed you too.
They diagnosed me as a so 4 days after I had Charlie, you go to like these I went to this like hospital evaluation where they basically rated me as a moderate to severe risk for postpartum depression. I was not diagnosed with it because when you've only just had your baby, it could just be the baby blues. So that's what people were calling it. And even like when I was opening up about how I felt to certain family members, everyone was telling me, like, no, you just have the baby blues. And I think the reason when people were saying that is because for the longest time, I've had anxiety, bouts of anxiety throughout my life, but people always knew me as the most upbeat person. I think people couldn't imagine that I was depressed. Like I truly think people thought, oh, this is just a 2 week slump and Mia will get over it. So when I did try to seek validation from others, it was like, no, you just have the baby blues. You're fine. You're just sleep deprived, And I thought, yeah, you're right. You're right. But really, that cloud lasted for over a year and it resulted in postpartum anxiety and my inability to drive. I remember like needing groceries, but having to wait till 8 o'clock at night for Jan to come home from work so that we could go together because I literally couldn't leave the house. I would be like struck by this intense paralyzing anxiety, like what if I start driving and Charlie starts to cry and then I like get in an accident, and what if Charlie stops breathing, and I would just like stare at him all night. And I was so tired and I couldn't sleep. And now that I've done the research and I made so much content now on YouTube about postpartum depression and anxiety, like looking back, I know I had both PPA and PPD, but I just didn't know when I was going through it. And I'm so sad about that. And unfortunately, my OB-GYN did not teach me anything about that. And while I'm all for people like being their own advocate and doing research, I had literally no concept of this. I didn't even know postpartum depression and anxiety were a thing until after I had my baby and was already in the fog. So that's not exactly the best place to learn. And my doctor, which if you didn't know, I wrote a whole article about how he performed an episiotomy on me without my permission. That's a whole nother episode for another day. We could probably share that story of what happened in the delivery room, because my
Mm-hmm.
doctor was really awful. He was kind of like unleashed this horrible egomaniac narcissistic personality on me. In the Jan's nodding his head, but
Yes.
it was bad. And if you don't know what an episiotomy is, it basically is when a doctor uses scissors down there to widen your opening. Anyway, lots of fun. Basically, I had a traumatic birth, and he didn't like me very much. So I didn't have a doctor who cared, who I could go to at my 6-week postpartum visit, and say how I was really doing.
Mm-hmm.
People were like, well, why didn't you tell your OB-GYN? Why didn't you tell your doctor? I didn't feel safe to tell my doctor how I was feeling. Like, I wouldn't want to go in there and be like, I'm feeling really sad, so I didn't have that support. I didn't have any family validating me. I think Jan was worried about me, but he didn't even know much about postpartum depression and
Yeah,
anxiety.
or what you do about it, because or I like the extent of what you're told is like, oh, sometimes you can get postpartum depression after, but like you're not really told what that looks like,
Yeah, you're not told that the
and you're
mom
so
could
sleep
like,
deprived that's like you're not exactly thinking about doing that. You're thinking about caring about your kid and
mm-hmm,
getting sleep
surviving.
and surviving.
And
Yeah,
you had just started your job 4 months before we had Charlie. And in California, the law is that you can't have the 3 month, or is it 6 week? No, 3 month paid family leave bonding time unless you've worked at the company for a year, I think.
yeah, I think it's a year.
It's a year. So Jan didn't qualify for that, but his work gave him 2 weeks off, and he had to basically use all of his vacation days. And we're grateful that they gave us that 2 weeks off, but 2 weeks is not enough time to adjust to a new baby. Like, holy cow, it's not enough time. So basically, what we're trying to say is neither of us were really prepared for the mental and emotional transition of parenthood. And that is why I am such a staunch advocate for people understanding the mental and emotional transition. I mean, we paid money to go to birthing classes. We learned about, how you can physically help me in labor, which, by the way, we didn't use any of that crap. I didn't even want him to touch me. I was in so much pain. And people were like, oh, like he can hold you this way and help you breathe this way. And it's like anytime he touched me, and I was extremely nauseous. It literally, you could touch my shoulder like when I was in labor, and it literally felt like I was on a boat and someone was rocking it back and forth. Like, it aggravated my nausea. So the birthing class stuff went out the window. And what I'm trying to say is, not a single time in the birthing class did anybody talk about mental health.
No.
Not a single time. This nurse had delivered babies for 40 years, and you would think that part of it was a 2-day birthing class series. And not a single time did anyone mention about mental health or what to do, or the fact that postpartum depression can lead to suicidal thoughts and like could even lead to you wanting to harm your baby, and just it's a serious thing. And people are not preparing women and families and partners for the reality that
Mm-hmm.
is. And it's just so sad because on top of adjusting to having a baby and my body being so hurt from the birth, I'm dealing with all of these intense, huge emotions, and I have no way to describe them. It's so important, and this is a little takeaway from this incredible pediatric neurologist, basically, and it's from this book called Baby Brain Rules, but there was a study that was done that was scanning children's brains, and it showed that when a child was able to identify or name a feeling, that the stress patterns in their brain significantly reduced, which is what informs psychologists and the mental health world today, that when we know how to describe how we're feeling, when we're able to name what we're going through or put a diagnosis to it or a label, I know people are against labels, but sometimes they're good. It actually helps to calm your nervous system down because it helps you understand what you have so that you can stop freaking out and go into like, okay, this is what I have. Now, how do I handle it? It's basically like increasing your vocabulary on a subject or your knowledge on a subject. So that's why even just learning about what could happen, postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, postpartum OCD, just learning about it while you're pregnant is actually really calming. And I used to be in the camp of, I don't want to learn about all this stuff because it's just going to freak me out. And if you're pregnant or if you're in that boat where you're like, oh, I don't want to learn too much because what if I don't even have that problem and I'm just freaking myself out about what if this happens or what if I get postpartum depression? I understand, I hear you because I used to be like that. But if there's anything I've learned from being on this mental health journey since 2014, it's that the more you know, honestly, the calmer you will feel. And it does take some growth to not be like, oh no, what if I get this? What if I get that? You have to understand that you are learning to equip and prepare yourself and your partner, not to freak yourself out about all the potential of things that could go wrong.
Yeah, because everyone's thing is their birth and everything. That's going to be completely different. Like,
Yeah.
there's no one size fits all, and there's a million and one things that can happen. So.
I think preparing yourself with knowledge and having people you can go to talk to. And we didn't have that. And in our group of friends, we were the first ones really to have a baby. So we didn't have anyone to talk to about that. And I mean, as far as I know, my friends didn't have postpartum depression or anxiety, at least from as far as I know. And if they did, maybe they just don't want to share about it. So it's hard also to find people who are willing to talk about it, right? It's hard, even though we have really great friends who are couples. It's not like we sit down and like on FaceTime or over the phone or in person go, hey, how's it going? Did you have postpartum depression after you had your first? Like, it's not a conversation that happens. And I think we have one couple that we're really good friends with, and it took a really long time before we even had the discussion about mental health and having babies and kind of opened up about that, right? So it's not, even if you do have friends or family members, not everyone has someone to go to. So I just want to say, like, this podcast, like, the whole reason why I started this, in addition to the videos I already make, is because if you don't have anyone that you can talk to, I hope to goodness that Jan and I can be like kind of that virtual couple that you're like, okay, I'm not crazy. There's another couple out there that's been through this, so that you have somebody to go to. We're not therapists, obviously. We're not psychologists or doctors, but we're another couple that's been through it. So if you ever have a question, like, just please know that you can DM us or leave a comment, and we just want to help as best we can, because I think more than anything, we just wish we had someone that could have told us, like, hey, this might be what's happening. Here's what you should do. Because we didn't even have an idea of what we should do. We just kind of soldiered through it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I felt it all lift when Charlie turned 1, which is actually really common. Postpartum depression lifts for most women when the child turns 1. And it's usually because you stop breastfeeding, or you're breastfeeding a lot less, so your hormones start to change again. But for every woman, it's different. Like, so some people are like, breastfeeding takes away postpartum depression. That's great if that's the case for you, but it's not the case for me.
Yeah. Everyone's situation is going to be different.
Everyone's situation is so different. And I think it's so important.
Everything.
Yeah, it's so important also, like, to take everything we're saying with a grain of salt. Like, know that we're just sharing what worked for us, but ultimately what we're promoting to you is to just be as informed as possible and listen to your body and your mind and your heart, and talk to your partner and be honest and open. Because I even think there was a time when I didn't want to label it, because I didn't want to feel broken or unequipped. And there's all that shame that comes with it, which, by the way, I think is complete crap, and you don't need to feel shame about it. But there was a time when I felt like Jan didn't really understand my hopelessness. I don't think I voiced to you that I was feeling suicidal after I had Charlie.
No, not initially anyway.
And then one day I found this video on Facebook that was viral, and it was making its rounds again. And it was of that guy that had jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived. He was talking about just the mental state that he was in that made him want to jump off the bridge. And I just started bawling my eyes out, because even though this guy is from a completely different world than me, to a certain degree, I understood what he was feeling and experiencing. And I'm usually not at a loss for words, as you guys know if you've been listening to the podcast. But I really struggled to tell Jan how I was feeling, because I didn't want him to feel like he just married a broken woman. I didn't want it to feel that way. And so I did keep some stuff to myself initially. Now we're super open. Everything's on the table. But I had him sit down and I said, Jan, I need you to watch this video. And he watched the video, and I think you got emotional. And up until that point, it just felt like there was kind of a wall that was growing between us. Like, you were tired. I was tired. We were having fights about the dishes. We were having fights about, I don't know, taking care of Charlie and just being exhausted. We were both working still. And I looked at him and I said, I feel the way this guy feels. Like, this is the kind of hopelessness that I'm feeling right now. And it just like shattered the wall that was growing between us and created such a breakthrough. And I'm bringing this up because sometimes it's too freaking hard. Sometimes you don't have the vocabulary to describe how you're feeling. Or maybe you could tell your partner that you feel really sad and they can be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, babe." You can be like, "No, honey, I feel really sad
all the time.
all the time."
Like, and yeah, so it's like, make it clear. Don't try to drop hints. Like, and the video did help me understand, like, hearing this guy's perspective of how he came to that point and like how much, like, I guess he regretted it and all that stuff. Just like understanding the emotion
And how much he was
behind
suffering,
it.
though, and
Yes,
how
and the
much
pain and
the
suffering
pain
and that
that
kind of stuff.
he wanted it to end. And the thing is, too, is like, I want to say, like, I wasn't just trying to drop hints or anything like that. It was like, I think I'm so comfortable now saying I've struggled with suicidal thoughts. I've wanted to kill myself, but it's taken me years. Like, I've been on this journey of actively working on myself since 2014. It's been 6 years. So if you're just getting into it and maybe your partner, like Jan and I have very different childhoods, very different backgrounds, it's hard for your partner to even get in the headspace of like what that's like. They can't even fathom. So even if you're like, "No, I'm really sad all the time," your partner could respond with, "Sometimes you just have seasons in life where you just feel really sad all the time." They might not get it. And sometimes you don't want to, it can really scare people if you just come out and say, like, "I feel like killing myself." That really scares people. So what I'm trying to say is, if you're having a hard time talking to your partner about how you're feeling, don't put it off. Just find another way to talk to them, whether through a video, or I've had people tell me that they've sat down with their partner and watched a video with them about natural family planning or about postpartum depression. They're like, "This girl is going through what I'm going through." And that's what I did with my husband, with this video of a guy who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, and it created such a breakthrough in our marriage. So I just want you to know that if you're struggling to communicate, do not beat yourself up more, because it is hard. Just find another way to have that communication, to facilitate that communication. But yeah, no, I remember we had this moment where I was crying, you were crying, we were hugging, and you were sharing like a time in your life, I think in your adolescence, where you like felt really, really, really down and felt like crap, and like really crap. And it just was such a good breakthrough for us. So that was kind of the first big moment. And then I would say the second big moment was when kind of everything in my family was falling apart. And I'm not going to go into details because that's not only my story to share, but basically we were kind of thrust into being caregivers for my older brother and my younger brother, who has autism and an autoimmune disease, a very serious autoimmune disease. And basically a lot of really stressful things were happening, and I was starting to get really depressed again. And this was before I was pregnant with Ellie, but kind of leading into it as well. I remember starting to tell you every day that I was feeling sad. And you were stressed about work, tired, also being affected by my family stress as well, and trying to process it in your own way. I started to feel resentful and really upset and almost like you didn't care. But I know, no matter what happens, I know how deeply Jan loves me. This guy pursued me so hardcore. Like, this is a whole nother podcast episode, but holy crap, this guy has major persistence. Even though I was feeling like he didn't love me because I was like feeling like you didn't respond the way that I wanted you to when I said, "Honey, I'm really sad." And you were like, "I'm sorry," but you were so tired. And I think that's another thing. When people have kids, that first year, even first 2 years, is so exhausting that it's hard to have space for your partner's emotions. So even though I was feeling resentful and a little bit upset, I knew deep down, like, I know Jan loves me. There's something else going on here. And so I made the decision to get a psychologist, to get a therapist. And that was hard. It took a long time, but you were fully supportive of it.
Yeah, I was actively encouraging it.
He was actively encouraging it. And I want to bring this up because this was a huge game changer for our marriage. And I'm going to let you describe, in your words, why you think it was.
Well, I think it changed things a lot because, I mean, it's not your responsibility so much to fix your spouse as it is to just support them. So I'm not a psychologist, obviously. And I feel like I do want to fix things. Like, that's normal for
Yeah.
you guys
But
out
because
there.
you didn't know how, you kind
But
of
I didn't know
detached.
how. You kind of like, yes, and like you just kind of try to be like, "I'm sorry you feel that way," but you can't. You feel helpless because you have no way of fixing it. You have no expertise in that field. So, I mean, what became the best thing is like encouraging her to look for a therapist and do that stuff. Because when she actually started going to therapy, then you start to see improvement, and that's where you can kind of help actually, like in an active way, instead of feeling helpless about it.
It improved our discussions as well around my mental health. I think you also started to take things more seriously. Not that you were discrediting how I was feeling, but I think you didn't understand like how severe what I was going through was. And I'd be able to come home on Wednesday nights, and after the kids or our son went to bed, he would sit down and say, "So how was therapy today?" And it would stimulate like an hour-long discussion about what I talked about in therapy, some traumas I was working through, some stressors I was going through, how I was feeling. And I would share things that like my therapist was recommending for me to do, and that my therapist was recommending for us to do together. And I feel like just coming from a therapist, like instead of saying, "Hey, Jan, I think we should do this for my mental health," but saying, "Hey, Jan, my psychologist is saying we need to do this for my mental health," I feel like you took it more seriously and were like, okay, this is like doctor's orders. You know, because technically I say therapist, but she's a psychologist. She's actually a doctor of psychology. And I think it helped both of us take what I was going through more seriously.
And it gives you more like direction that feels like it's coming from, because it is coming from a place of expertise, like in terms of how you can treat this and make it better.
And then I had an outlet for all the crap I was feeling. I had someone to go to every single week to talk to about it. And that helped me to stop dumping all of my family baggage, my life, my depression, everything. It helped me to stop dumping that all on you. And then instead of our evenings being Mia's gonna whine and moan about what's happening, it became more productive conversations about what I'm going through and what we can do about it. Whereas before I would dump things on you and want you to fix it. And I'm a fixer. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, Jan can attest to this. I like to solve my own challenges. Right, honey?
Yes.
So I hate being helpless. I hate feeling helpless. But the thing about mental illness is like, you are kind of helpless in it. You can't trick your mind out of depression or anxiety. And anyone who tells you you can is a liar, and you should start unfollowing them on Instagram. Anyway.
You might want to do more than just that.
Yeah, you might want to do more than just that. But basically what I'm trying to say is Jan and my relationship improved because then we could just enjoy each other's company after our child went to bed, instead of me expressing all this depressing stuff, him not knowing what to do about it. So he's withdrawing emotionally because he feels bad that he can't fix it. And then instead it changed to I had somewhere to go with all those feelings. I stopped expecting my spouse to be my therapist. And then our marriage we started to connect again and be each other's partner again. And I want to seriously drive home something. If you are a survivor of trauma, I went through an entire childhood of trauma and neglect. Even if you're not that, if you're someone who struggles with any sort of mental illness, it is your responsibility to get help. And your partner can help you and support you. You know, Jan was really encouraging. And I remember crying to him because I was really stressed about money then. And I said, this is going to cost us so much money. We have to pay for the therapy co-pays. We were paying for insurance. We have to pay for a babysitter every time I go. It takes time. And Jan said, if you had cancer, I would happily go into debt to make sure that you had everything you needed to heal. We're going to treat your mental illness the same way.
Yeah, because it's like mental illness can become life-threatening.
It can become life-threatening, and it has been life-threatening. And
culturally, we don't treat it that way.
We don't.
And that's like a huge cultural issue that we need to get over, because it is actually a life-threatening condition. It's not some weird esoteric spiritual thing out there. It's a psychological, physiological condition.
Sharon, you can't pray away. Gertrude, you can't pray away depression and anxiety.
These aren't actually people.
These aren't real, but they're kind of real people who've commented on my videos.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, we all know. Sorry if anyone's really named Sharon. I love you. You're fine. Everything's okay. But no, thanks for saying that, love, because you're right. In our culture, we do not treat it seriously, and we act like we can just pray it away or self-care it away. And I'm all about the self-care, but I'm also like self-care and take your drugs.
Spiritual things and self-care can help, but they're not a solution or a treatment to it.
In itself, yeah. And no. And the thing that's scary about mental illness is that you think everything's fine or it's tough and you're just getting through it, but it can so quickly turn into a life-threatening situation. And I think especially if you haven't told anyone about it, you're not going to have anyone who's going to be able to see those signs and help you through it. So speak up early, speak up often, and get help. And not everyone can afford therapy. There was a time we couldn't afford it at all. And instead, I went to a support group. I went to a support group with other survivors of sexual, emotional, and physical abuse. And it was extremely enlightening and helpful to know that I wasn't alone. So there's a lot of ways. There's virtual support groups, there's free support groups, there's so many things. There's so many resources out there if you just sit down and look. So I highly recommend, if you're struggling and you can't afford therapy, like, what can you afford? Can you focus on the things that you can do, not the things that you can't? Okay. Like, I say that all the time. And it's because I think, especially when you're down in the dumps, it's so easy to focus on what you can afford and what you can't do and whatever. But what can you do? Can you sit down on a Saturday morning with your spouse and like Google like local support groups or virtual support groups? Because they're out there. They really are out there. And with the world of Instagram, there's so many psychiatrists, psychologists, psychotherapists, there's so many professionals that actually host support groups for very affordable prices or for free. So please be solutions oriented about this and take action after this episode. If you are struggling, like, don't just turn off the episode and go back to the way things were. Like, I really hope that you listening to this means that you really care about this and that you want to learn about what you can do to make things better, either for you or your spouse or whoever is struggling. And I want you to know that with effort, you can get better. Like, how would you describe, like, things are so much better from my perspective in our relationship.
And it also helped, I think, you a lot to keep going to therapy. Because from my perspective, I could actually see more objectively that you were getting better, even though you're feeling down still. Like, you would be in a much better mood, like actually doing all those things.
My ability
to cope. Having that feedback from me encouraged you to go and continue to look for help and do
I'd
those
be like,
things.
Because I'd have to like switch therapists because of insurance stuff or whatever. And I would always say, can I take a break from therapy? Do you think I should take a break? And Jan's like, no. He's like, no, it's really helping you, as sweet as he can. He's like, it's really helping you. I see a lot of change.
It's like think about it like stopping medical treatment for something seriously just because
an ongoing disease that you have.
It's just like, you typically wouldn't do that. That would be a bad idea.
Yeah. And some people do have situational depression. For instance, if you've only ever experienced depression because of having a baby, for instance, and obviously, disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, but from what I've learned from talking to a therapist friend of mine, that's called situational depression. And it can lift after you're out of that season of life, or maybe you're situationally depressed because of a job you're in and you switch jobs and all of a sudden that depression's gone. But odds are, if you're someone who's experienced depression or anxiety or any sort of mental illness or eating disorder even throughout your childhood, it's probably heavily genetically linked and also heavily linked to your circumstances. So I'm a trauma survivor and I probably will need therapy for the rest of my life. And I don't say that to scare you if you're listening to this and you are a trauma survivor. I say that so that you know that when things come up, maybe 10 years from now, it's not a cause for you to beat yourself up like, oh, I'm still broken. I still haven't fixed all of this. I just made a video the other day talking about pace and patience, how those of us who are trauma survivors, like, it is a lifelong commitment to healing and overcoming the stuff we've went through. And while it is not our fault that we were hurt the way we were hurt, abused the way we were abused, neglected, whatever, it is not our fault. We do have to take responsibility for the healing portion. And there is a point where we can't just blame our past. And that's like a good segue for what I want to talk about next, which is that when things got stressful in pregnancy, in marriage, with finances, with birth, with postpartum depression, there were times when I was not as kind to Jan as I should have been, or where I was upset about, for instance, the dishes, and I blew up completely out of proportion to what the issue was. And I could sit there and say, oh, I blow up at you because that's how my parents fought. Or I blow up at you because I'm just really struggling, or I had a hard childhood, and so I struggle with depression because of my childhood and because my parents did this, or whatever it is. You don't get to just cop out from your actions and blame it on your past. You don't get to do that. Once you become an adult, once you turn 18, in my opinion, you don't get to blame the people who abused you anymore. And And I think that's really important for you to hear, because if you're someone who was abused by somebody, not blaming them doesn't mean they're not responsible for what you did. It just stops you from channeling all of that energy into blame and instead redirecting it into your own healing. Because you can't simultaneously take responsibility and action for your healing and blame at the same time. You literally
Yeah.
can't.
You want to be conscious of
Where it's coming from.
where it's coming from, but in that consciousness should be a trigger for you to realize, oh, I need to, I guess, take a step back and reevaluate how I'm feeling and why I'm feeling this way.
Yeah. Your partner doesn't deserve to be the recipient of all of your baggage. Period. And there's this weird idea in our culture where people think that like you're supposed to like we each bring our own baggage to our relationship. We each do, For Jan, it's different. It might not be depression and anxiety and childhood trauma, but he has his stuff. But we are really good at, I think, not allowing each other to go, hey, I have all this baggage. I'm going to dump it on you. Can you fix it? Because we learned several years ago that that doesn't work. It drains the marriage of the energy and the passion and the love. Like, it really does.
You can't dump your stuff on your partner. It's like the long and short of it. Like sometimes it's just like it just comes out in weird ways.
It comes out in weird ways. Yeah.
Like unexpected ways, but then you sometimes have to actually
It's
try
a good
to be
trigger.
objective and
It's a good trigger. You're like, oh, there's something going on here. I need to work on this. And so I think it's important, you're not a robot. Stuff in your childhood is going to rear its ugly head. But what I'm trying to say is don't say, oh, I'm sorry. That was because of this that happened to me 10 years ago. That's not actually an apology. Like, just apologize, say where you think it's coming from, and then say what you're going to do about it. I think more than anything, it's just so important in those moments where you act out or you be rude or mean and your partner really didn't deserve that you as quickly as possible apologize, because they shouldn't be on the receiving end of all of that, and just say, I'm so sorry. I'm feeling really anxious today. Can I go take a walk outside by myself, clear my head, and give them a hug or whatever, because they didn't deserve that. So I guess I just wanted to emphasize the fact that if you struggle with mental illness because of genetic factors or because of trauma factors, know that if you spend all of your time and energy in blame, you really, like, from my personal experience, you're not going to have the energy to heal, because the work of going to therapy and working on your healing, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of energy. I mean, I think Jan can share his side of it. Like, what do you see? Because I always tell people that the healing work doesn't really take place in therapy. It takes place in all the hours outside of that 1 hour a week. What, from your perspective, do you see like me doing to help? Like, I always talk about inner work, and I actually wonder, like, do you see how much work I do on myself to heal my trauma and to forgive the people who've hurt me?
yeah, I mean the outward stuff, I definitely see it, and like I've seen the progress of it and how it's become more part of your routine, like whatever self-care things that you're doing.
What do you see me do?
I mean, you get
I'm
up and do
curious.
yoga more often now, or just exercise and like doing all those little things, taking a shower, doing your makeup just for the sake of feeling good about yourself, and like positive things that you didn't do initially that you've slowly developed a habit of doing, which have helped in addition to other treatments such as therapy and medication.
Yes. So I do go to therapy still, and I take medication every single day for my mental health. And I want to lay that out there, because for the longest time I was extremely resistant to medication. And then I heard a podcast of a woman I deeply admire and respect and never would have thought that she had a mental illness. And she did an episode with her sister. I'm going to give her a shout out. Her name's Rachel Nielsen. It's a 3 in 30 podcast. It's a really great resource for parents and mothers. But she had this whole episode about having an eating disorder, going to therapy. Her mom died of breast cancer when she was young, and such an incredible story. And she shared that she took medication, and that for me was a sign from God that I'm on the right path, that I should at least look into medication. And it has been life-saving and life-changing for me, which is actually another great segue for us to talk about what happened last November, November, when I was supposed to go to court to testify against the person who abused me. And it resurrected a level of anxiety and depression I had never experienced at all in my life. And then that led to deep, deep depression, where I was the most suicidal I had ever been, where the suicidal thoughts were intrusive and they would not leave. Sometimes in the past, when I've had suicidal thoughts, they've come when I'm kind of stuck at home. Like I was stuck at home with Charlie alone, right? Holding a baby, can't distract myself with like cleaning or cooking. But this time, last November, no matter what I did, the suicidal thoughts were there. That's what it's called, intrusive suicidal ideation, where no matter what you're doing, you have these thoughts of wanting to die or kill yourself. And it was so intense. I remember one day I couldn't stop crying. And I Googled like suicidal ideation and I started to read about it and about how if you wake up and you wish that you were dead, or you wish that you wouldn't wake up the next day, or you just have thoughts of like getting in an accident or like accidentally dying so that you could just not be here. People think that suicidal thoughts are imagining themselves actively killing themselves with like a gun or a knife.
Which it can be.
Which it can be. But if you educate yourself, suicidal thoughts have a range. And when I read that, I realized, no, this is real. And I'm saying that because I want you, if you are not having necessarily the thoughts about actively killing yourself, but maybe you're having thoughts of getting in an accident, hoping that you get in an accident or hoping that you don't wake up the next day. That's actually also classified as suicidal ideation and is considered a severe life-threatening condition that needs immediate medical treatment, and you should call 911 or, I'm supposed to say you should call 911 because it is serious. So once I read that, it helped me to stop being in like second guess land where I was like, oh, it's not really suicidal ideation. Like I'm just really depressed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was also dealing with a whole slew of other factors, right? My sinusitis was really bad. I couldn't breathe. I was in a lot of pain every day. Anyway, so I call Jan, and he worked at the time at a job that was not very family friendly and does not look kindly on people like going home to take care of their sick family member or whatever. So it's serious when I call Jan while he's at work. It's like 2 p.m, and I'm like, I need you to come home. I'm really struggling. And he was like, I can be out of here like in 30 minutes. And I knew that meant that he wasn't going to be home for an hour. And even that was too long because I had waited too long to really acknowledge what was happening. And I just couldn't stop crying. Anyway, I ended up calling the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline and talking to someone on the phone. And it wasn't the most like warm and fuzzy experience, but it was still really helpful to have someone on the phone with me while I was waiting for Jan to get home. What was that like for you when I called you?
Scary.
Do you remember?
I mean, yeah, I remember it.
I don't remember what I said to you.
I mean, it's scary because you're at like work and then you're trying to get out of there as quickly as possible.
Right. I know. I felt really bad. You don't want to hurt your spouse. You don't want to hurt. I also feel bad that he's at work dealing with work stress, trying to provide for our family. And here I am like, come home and please take care of me and the kids.
At that point, I want to just like forget my work and like, which I pretty much did. I like finished sending something to someone and then like went home.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You're an amazing partner. And of course you would do that. But I just want to speak to all the people who are worried about being a burden, because when you're super depressed, which I wasn't even able to really get up and feed the kids. I think I had like told Charlie to go he's our 3.5-year-old, to like grab some biscuits. And I just gave the kids biscuits and sippy cups and laid on the couch while they like just ate biscuits all afternoon because I couldn't get up and make them food. I just want to say that, guess what? When you're sick, you kind of do have to let yourself be a burden to the other person. And I don't like that word, but I think we need to just...
You're not being a burden. You need to...
But it is heavy.
Yes.
It is heavy. And I think, okay, I should say, you need to let the people who love you carry you.
Yes. Let them help you.
And I think what's hard is like we think, oh my gosh, but that makes me a burden. It's like, no, that makes you human and that makes you someone who needs help. Mm-hmm. And there will be a time when your spouse needs help from you, your partner needs help from you, and then the roles will shift. And I mean, I know this is becoming more common knowledge, but I'm going to repeat it for anyone who doesn't know that a healthy marriage, a healthy relationship is not 50-50. It's 100-100. Each of you giving what you can. Brene Brown actually explains it really well, where she's like, some seasons your husband's going to be 80 and you're going to be 20. And some seasons your partner's going to be 30 and you're going to be 70. There's never going to be a time where you're both perfectly, equally, seamlessly, giving the same
and
amount of
there's no way
effort.
to even keep track of it. And anyone
And if
who's
you are keeping
counting,
track,
that's another problem.
it's a red flag. Are you really in a real relationship? Like if you're
You might
counting,
want to
reevaluate.
evaluate that.
Yeah. So it was really scary. You came home, and I want to actually say like what I needed that Jan did so well without me even having to tell you what I needed, which is crazy. I think he's just secretly a ninja and knows what to do
Vaguely
at this point.
remember what.
Here's what he did. So there were times when I was so suicidal where I was literally crying my eyes out and like I wanted to scream, and there were moments where I yelled like I want to die. Like that's what like a suicidal depressive breakdown looks like. And you just held me. You just held me and you just kept saying no. Like you're wanted here, you're needed here. I love you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what I needed in that moment.
Yeah, because you can't really like fix the underlying problem, but you can be there and show that you're there to support them and encourage them. So that's all you can really do.
You just held me and let me cry.
Yeah, there's no like
for an
magic
hour.
Words.
There's no magic words, but I think just having someone be in that space with you was so incredible, and it was so what I needed. It was such a God thing. Like I think God like told you what I needed because it was what I needed, and I could say things like I want to die. I feel like so much hatred to myself, and I just want to say like that's the disease of depression. Like today, and Jan can vouch for me, like I do not hate myself. Like would someone who hates themselves get up at 6 a.m. and do yoga before her kids wake up? Would someone who hates themselves write down what they're grateful for every day? Would someone who hates themselves put on skinny jeans when you're in quarantine? Like, let's be real. I put on makeup.
I would wear skinny jeans though.
I've gotten dressed and taken such good care of myself, and even more so than ever since we've been in quarantine. And I think that's a testament to the fact that my mental health is so good. And so I'm saying that because I want people to understand that me sharing, like, there was a time not that long ago when I was like, I hate myself. I hate this. I need to die. I'm a burden on you guys. That was a disease. That's not really me.
Real or true. It's in your head.
It was in my head, and it was the disease of depression. And whether that all comes from trauma and the neglect I experienced as a child or from the genetic factors of depression that's run in my family, it was a disease. It wasn't me. And I'm able to separate myself from that. That's why I don't feel shame. That's why I can sit here right now and tell you and the entire world what I went through and not feel shame for it, because I know that that disease, having depression and anxiety, is not my fault. But again, it is my responsibility to take care of it, the same way that if Jan had diabetes or cancer, an autoimmune disease, I would hope that he would do what was necessary to take good care of himself so that he would be around for as long as possible for me and the kids and for himself and for his own life and his own dreams and goals. Anyway, so if you have a partner who's really suffering right now, instead of trying to fix them, maybe if they're really in the darkest place, talk with them about getting professional help. Like I remember I Googled how to help someone with major depression. And I sent the article to Jan, and then he read through it. And I feel like I gave you some hope. Like you were like, oh, I can do these things to help Mia.
It gives you like specific things that you can do. So it's.
What were some of the things so that we can share with others that you.
It's been a while since I read it.
I know. I remember them. So
I think one of the big ones at the top was the don't be trying to like fix it or like essentially like.
You'll be fine. You're fine.
Yeah, like none of that. Like just being there and listening is more important. And
you let me say everything that I was feeling. And what was crazy is that actually was part of the healing. Getting out, like saying out loud, I hate myself. I want to kill myself. I'm worthless. I feel like I will never amount to anything. I'm hopeless. It was actually saying that stuff out loud to someone else and crying so hard that literally my whole body was hurting. Like the whole next day, my eyes were puffy the whole next day. But I felt the power of the depression weaken the next day. And I think it's because you gave me a space to say the things that were controlling me. And that doesn't mean that it went away. I still went to a psychiatrist and I got medication. Like what I'm trying to say,
a one-time fix.
No, but it took me off the brink. It took me off the brink, and it just shows how important it is to have someone to talk to. And not everybody has that. So that's why I'm saying it's so important that like, even after all that happened, I had an appointment with a psychiatrist and I got officially diagnosed with PTSD and major depressive disorder. And again, that's hard, but it also gives Jan and I a place to like go from. Like, okay, Mia has PTSD and depression. Like, what does it mean to have PTSD? And for me, I'm able to now read books about having PTSD and depression. I'm able to like really understand and study my condition, and the therapy that I go to from here on out is targeted to those specific illnesses because not all therapists are created equal, and different therapists are trained in different therapy modalities. And what that means is some therapists have understand certain techniques to help you with PTSD, while other therapists have certain techniques to help you with an eating disorder. So it's actually really helpful to have a diagnosis. And so what Jan did for me was he provided a space for me to cry and cry and cry and cry. And then the next day it was like, okay, what can we do? What professional can we go to help you with this illness? And Jan was right there alongside me. So some of the tips in the article that I sent you was like, get outside every day, let the person speak their feelings without judgment, trying to fix them. It was eat a healthy diet. And it was, I think even practicing gratitude was on there. And just having someone else know what I needed to do, it helped hold me accountable. And it helped me to like ask for what I needed. So when I would be like, hey, Jan, I want to go and like do some exercise, he would be very encouraging of it and willing to watch the kids because he knew that it's not just because I want my butt to look nice, which if there's nothing wrong with that.
I
If you
mean, I
want
don't
to
mind that
actually, I mean,
either.
yeah, I mean, I'm getting such a nice booty from being quarantined. Let me tell you, like, oh my gosh, it's been forever since I've had a nice booty. But anyway, he knew that it was also super good for my mental health. So, or sometimes we'll do family walks. Like we did a family walk today.
Mhm.
And I think it's like, it's a non-negotiable for us now. Like we know how important it is for all of us to get outside and to get exercise. But anyway, that was a lot.
Yeah.
Jan got emotional reflecting on, you guys can't see it, but he got emotional reflecting on the day that I was crying my eyes out. And I mean, obviously, I felt, and simultaneously going through that, I feel bad for you. I'm like, I feel bad that I'm causing you pain. Like, because it's
Don't feel
painful to
bad.
see someone you love
Yeah,
in
I
pain.
mean, it's painful in like it's not like physical pain. I mean, it's
It
emotional
hurts.
pain. Yeah, and it's hard. I won't say like any of this was like oh super easy or anything like
Mm-mm.
that, but it's like as long as you're there actively helping, that helps it.
Yeah. And I think what I try to remind myself, and I want to remind all of you listening, is that your partner who loves you would rather sit and be in pain with you than have you
Yeah, I mean,
than have
you
you
want to
leave.
take the pain away, even though you can't,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where it's like a lot of it comes from that desire to, I guess, fix it. But
Mm-hmm.
it's like, but the most help you can do is to be there. So
Mm-hmm. You were there, you were helping me with good habits. Like I took a break from social media and I remember saying like, hey, if you see me on my phone, can you just gently ask me why I'm on my phone? Because most of the time I'm scrolling and comparing my life. And when I was in that really dark place, I really needed to take a break from social media and I unfollowed everybody. And if I unfollowed you and you feel really bad about it, I'm sorry. It wasn't because I don't love having you in my feed. It's because one of my triggers is when I'm feeling down is I want to use social media as an unhealthy coping mechanism. And so I figured that if I unfollowed everyone and had no one in my feed, there was no reason to go on Instagram because my feed was empty. And it actually did work for a time. It was a band-aid, but it helped. It's kind of like if you're an alcoholic and you get rid of all the alcohol from the house. It doesn't heal your alcoholism, but it does help. So anyway, that's a side note. But what I'm trying to say is just invite your partner in. Like, give them things that they can do to help and support you because they want to. Please do not think for 1 second that your partner would rather have you dead and gone than have to struggle through mental illness with you.
mhm.
Jan, I'm 100% certain would go through what we went through 500 more times than lose me altogether.
Yes,
Then
one
me be
hundred
like,
percent.
oh, Jan, like that was really hard for you, exhausting, painful. I mean, Jan came home from work, had all this work stress. People were still texting you to get stuff done. He was making dinner, taking care of the kids, and I'm just lying on the couch crying my eyes out. Like it was not pretty. Like it was not a pretty time. That was our holidays. Like me going through that, adjusting to medication. It takes sacrifice and love and commitment. And Jan has, I'm just gonna commend you right now. Like I tell you this all the time, but I wouldn't be here without you.
I'm glad that you're still here.
But I know that not everybody has such a loving partnership, and that makes me really sad. But I want you to know that that's why it's so important to get a counselor or a therapist or to find a support group where you can be loved and welcomed and understood and accepted, because you seriously do need a community to help you through what you're going through. And whether that's a community of one from a counselor or a therapist, or a community of 20 in your local support group, you need a community. So please, if you're struggling, do not just, turn this podcast off and go about your life and shove it all down again. Like, please, please take something from this and go and get help, because your loved ones would rather struggle through this with you than have you take your life or completely cop out from the fight as to not be a quote unquote burden, because you're not a burden. Like, you are loved and you are needed, and you just need help. And it's not your fault that you need help. You don't need to beat yourself up for needing help. You don't need to be mad at yourself for having brokenness, because we all have it. It's better to focus your energy on healing and forgiveness and compassion and getting the help that you need. This was a heavy topic. I feel like we could talk about it forever, but I just want to say that if you want us to do a part 2 follow-up, or if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to DM me at Mia Hemstad. Leave a comment below. And again, we will have more podcast episodes coming out. The next 2 will be only for Patreon members, and it's going to be about, well, we haven't chosen yet, but there's going to be topics like how we paid off $48,000 in debt, topics about how we practice natural family planning in our marriage, how we make space for each other to pursue our creative dreams and goals, and a whole bunch of other things. But we just want you to know that this is a resource for you. This is a resource for you and your partner, or if you're thinking about marriage, or if you haven't even started dating yet, but you just want to understand like what kind of goes into really being married, because people don't really talk about it. And rightly so. Like, you don't go to a wine party, people aren't going to talk about their mental illness.
Yeah. Another thing, it would be good to talk about the shifts.
What shift?
Between like pregnancy, like the mental shifts.
Oh no, we need to do a whole episode, because everyone told us we just needed one birth class to like learn about pain coping mechanisms while you're having contractions. That was pretty much it. But let us know if you're looking forward to an episode like that in the comments below. We'd love to know your feedback. Let us know if there is one point in this podcast episode that really excited you, inspired you, or felt like it would really help you. Anyway, thank you so much for spending this time with us. If you made it to the end, seriously, you're incredible. And we're so grateful that you are here. Don't forget to hit subscribe and the bell icon so that you don't miss out when we upload a new podcast. And again, we'll have one free podcast episode every single month for you. And if you can't afford the $5 a month, you can get 2 bonus podcast episodes. So we're happy to be here as a resource for all of you. And we can't wait to have this conversation next time. Any parting words, love?
Stay awesome.
Stay awesome. Stay safe. Stay inside.
Yeah,
# flatten the curve.
Yes.
Yeah, guys, hang in there. We know it's tough.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah.
But we'll get through this. All right, guys. We will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.